Gutom ka na ba?
Yeah.
Tara na. Alright, it is APPI, or Asian American and Pacific Islanders Month, in this month of May. That is the month where the United States commemorates Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders' contributions to the US. We're gonna celebrate that by sharing our culture, being Filipino. We're gonna share that through food, folklore, and open conversation. Right now, we're headed to this new Filipino place we haven't tried. It's called Pinoy Gourmet. And we're gonna grab some food. There's not really a lot of Filipino restaurants around here, so I'm really excited to try it, see how things taste, and see if it reminds me of home. So let's go. Let's go check it out. Let's go check it out. Our first dish is Lechon Kawali, a Filipino recipe consisting of pork belly slabs, deep fried in a pan or wok, seasoned beforehand, and cooked and served in cubes. This is paired with a Filipino mango and tomato salad and a lechon sauce. As you can see here, these are the layers of the lechon, the crispiest part on the top, the fatty part on the middle, and the real meat on the bottom. Next up is our pork adobo. Adobo has many variations, but at its core, the Filipino version of adobo consists of vinegar, soy sauce, pork, garlic, bay leaves, and it's known as the unofficial dish of the Philippines. This version had a very minimal amount of these ingredients, but it was still very flavorful. This was paired with an egg and some tomato and mango salad. This is called pancit bihon, one of the various traditional noodle dishes in the Philippines, which includes shrimp, cabbage, carrots, green beans, and soy sauce. I usually drench this in calamansi, a citrus native to the Philippines that gives it a tanginess and sour. This dish is called kwek-kwek, a Filipino street food, usually using quail eggs battered in flour and cornstarch. This time they used a regular chicken egg, so yeah. This is called crispy diniguan, also called pork blood stew, a savory stew consisting of lungs, kidneys, intestines, ears, heart, and snout, simmered in a rich, spicy dark gravy of pig's blood. This is also paired with garlic, chili, and vinegar. This is one of the more exotic dishes that we have, but it is one of my favorites. This is the prime example of not judging a book by its cover. It is very, very delicious. All right. We got our food, prayed over the food. Now we're gonna eat some Lechon Kawali. There we go. And I'm gonna try the kwekwe as well. See how that tastes. You can have the other half. Ooh. Good.
What does it taste like?
It's like an egg and batter. That's basically what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. I'm gonna tell some old Filipino folk tales. We're gonna try to figure out what the moral of the story is. The first one is the carabao and the shell. One very hot day, when the carabao went into the river to bathe, he met a shell, and they began talking together. "You are very slow," said the carabao to the shell. "Oh no," replied the shell, "I can beat you in a race." "Then let us try and see," said the carabao. So they went out on the bank and started to run. After the carabao had gone a long distance, he stopped and called, "Shell!" And another shell lying by the river answered, "Here I am." Then the carabao, thinking it was the same shell with which he was racing, ran on. By and by he stopped again and called, "Shell!" And another shell answered, "Here I am." The carabao was surprised that the shell could keep up with him, but he ran on, and every time he stopped to call, another shell answered him. But he was determined that the shell should not beat him, so he ran until he dropped dead. He got the lesson that he needed, like he was so fixated on proving a point that he didn't think that he was being tricked or anything. He was so into himself, so indulgent in himself, that he didn't realize that this shell has been tricking me. This shell that I thought was not strong or not fast enough was using the mind, What I wrote here was, the carabao is slow for not thinking. It became the death of him. It's just teaching you to be wise and not to get in your own way, basically. What did you take away from the story?
Or you don't judge people just because you think you're better than them. So, because they might have something you don't to win something.
Wow. Here, you try it. Take a bite from the bottom. What do you think?
Just like egg. Like a hard-boiled egg.
I think it's better when it's crispy, because usually it's crispy. Not bad. Okay, this story is called The Boy Who Became a Stone. One day, a little boy named Ilonen sat out in the yard making a bird snare, which is like a bird cage. And as he worked, a little bird called to him, "Come and catch me. I am making a snare for you," said the boy. But the bird continued to call until the snare was finished. Then Ilonen ran and threw the snare over the bird and caught it. And he put it in a jar in his house while he went with the other boys to swim. While he was away, his grandmother grew hungry, so she ate the bird. And when Ilonen returned and found that his bird was gone, he was so sad that he wished he might go away and never come back. He went out into the forest and walked a long distance, until finally he came to a big stone and said, "Stone, open your mouth and eat me." And the stone opened his mouth and swallowed the boy. When his grandmother missed the boy, she went out and looked everywhere, hoping to find him. Finally, she passed near the stone and cried out, "Here he is." Then the old woman tried to open the stone, but she could not. So she called the horses to come up and help her. They came and kicked it, but it would not break. Then she called the carabao, and they hooked it, but they only broke their horns. She called the chickens, which pecked it, and the thunder, which shook it, but nothing could open it. She had to go home without the boy. The moral of that story is, you feel heartbroken when you lose someone you love. Try this. We're gonna try the The diniguan. I'm gonna see how it tastes. I'll put some on mine. Hold on. It's really slimy. I'm gonna try with the pork. I think that's an onion. All right, cool.
Wow.
Good.
They made theirs like prickly.
Okay, this story is called The Man with the Coconuts. One day, a man who had been gathering his coconuts loaded his horse heavily with the fruit. On the way home, he met a boy whom he asked, "How long would it take to reach the house?" "If you go slowly," said the boy, looking at the load on the horse, "you will arrive very soon. But if you go fast, it will take you all day." The man could not believe this strange speech, so he hurried his horse. But the coconuts fell off, and he had to stop to pick them up. Then he hurried his horse all the more to make up for the lost time. But the coconuts fell off again. Many times he did this, and it was night when he reached home. So what do you think the moral of this story is?
Maybe if you like rush things, it doesn't always rushing things. That you shouldn't always rush things.
You shouldn't always rush things.
Mm-hmm.
I think too. I think that's true. That's right. Like, slow down and be patient and be clear with your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
If you go too fast, even in life, like if you go too fast, sometimes you might run into mistakes that you didn't need to run into if you just thought about it a little longer.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So. This story is called How the First Head Was Taken. One day, the moon, who was a woman named Kabigat, sat out in the yard making a large copper pot. The copper was still soft and pliable like clay, and the woman squatted on the ground with the heavy pot against her knees while she patted and shaped it. Now while she was working, a son of Kachal, the sun, came by and stopped to watch her mold the form. Against the inside of the jar, she pressed the stone, while on the outside with a wooden paddle, dripping with water, she pounded and slapped until she had worked down the bulges and formed a smooth surface. The boy was greatly interested in seeing the jar grow larger, more beautiful, and smoother with each stroke, and he stood still for some time. Suddenly the moon looked up and saw him watching her. Instantly, she struck him with a paddle, cutting off his head. Now, the sun was not near, but he knew as soon as the moon had cut off his son's head, and hurrying to the spot, he put the boy's head back on, and he was alive again. Then the sun said to the moon, "You cut off my son's head, and because you did this, even after the earth, people will cut off each other's head." So do you know the moral of that story?
No.
That one was kind of hard, but what we got was our actions have a consequence, whether good or bad, but we must also learn to forgive the mistakes done to us. That's supposed to be the moral of the story, you know?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that kind of makes sense.
It was a mistake because the boy wasn't trying to hurt her. She was just surprised. Instead of saying sorry or being apologetic, she just put back the head. We don't have do-overs, you know? So like, the sun punished the moon for the act of it. I guess they know that you can put the head back on, but just the fact that you did that, there's a consequence to it.
Is that telling where, like what?
These are the tribes.
The tribes? Oh.
Yeah, Igrot, Tingguaan. This story is called The Legend of the Pineapple, the Filipino folktale. Once upon a time, there was a woman who lived with her daughter, Piña, in a tiny hut in the village. They were poor, and the mother worked day and night to make both ends meet. No matter how hard she worked though, she never got any help from her daughter. Piña was lazy, a spoiled kid who liked to play in the backyard all day. Whenever her mother asked for help around the house or tried to send her on an errand, She would always find an excuse by saying she can't find the object that was needed to complete the task. If her mother asked her to sweep the house, for example, she would say she cannot find the broom, even if it was right there in front of her. Needless to say, her mother always ended up doing the work herself. One day, her mother became very ill. She called out to Piña, who, as usual, was playing in the backyard. Piña, Piña, come over here, anak. I am very sick. Can you cook some porridge for me, please? I am too weak to get up. Piña ignored her mother and continued to play. Piña, come over here this very instant, or else. Piña's mother mustered all her strength just to say this, but it worked. Piña stopped playing and went inside the house. She poked her head inside her mother's room. What do you want, Nanay? Her mother. You really expect me to cook for you? That's too hard, protested Piña, pouting and stomping her feet. Piña, it is very simple. Just put some rice in a pot and add water. Once the water boils, let it simmer for a while. Stir it occasionally with the ladle. Everything you need should be right there in the kitchen. Piña reluctantly left and went to the kitchen. Her mother could hear her banging the drawers and cabinets. Then her mother heard her open the back door and sneak out into the backyard. Her mother waited, and finally she called out to Piña again. Piña, did you cook like I told you to? No, was the defiant response. And why not? Was her mom's exasperated response. Because I could not find the ladle. Oh, you lazy child, you probably did not even bother to look for it. What am I going to do with you? I am here sick and cannot even count on you. Her mother wept bitterly. In anger, she shouted, I wish you would grow 1,000 eyes all over your head. Then you can find what you're looking for. Maybe then you won't have any more excuses. As soon as she said this, there was complete silence. Her mother thought, she's trying to be quiet, so I will forget about asking her again, she sighed. She waited a little bit to see if Piña would come back, realizing the wait was futile. She wearily got up to do the cooking herself. When she looked out into the backyard, Piña was nowhere to be found. She sighed again and said to herself, that lazy kid probably went to a friend's house so she did not have to do any more errands for me. Exhausted from the exertion, she soon went back to her room for a much needed rest. Weak as she was, she tried to do everything by herself, having given up on any help from Piña. Hours passed by, and then days. Still no sign of her wayward daughter. With a heavy heart, she thought that Piña ran away for sure. When she finally recovered from her illness, the first thing she did was to look for Piña. No one had seen or heard from her. It was like she disappeared into thin air. Months passed, and still no sign of her. The mother felt bad for her angry outburst, and she feared that she might probably never see her daughter again. One day, she was sweeping in the backyard where Piña used to play. For months now, she had noticed this strange plant growing on the very spot where she last saw Piña. By this time, the leaves of the plant had fully opened. Inside, she saw this strange yellow fruit that resembled a child's head with 1,000 eyes. 1,000 eyes. She suddenly remembered the spiteful words that she used that fateful day. With horror, she realized that in the same way her mother's love has spoiled her daughter, so did her anger unwittingly cursed her. Somehow her daughter had been turned into this plant. To honor the memory of her beloved daughter, she named the fruit Piña. She took loving care of it like it was her own daughter. The fruit flourished so well that it bore more and more fruits, and popular among the village and the entire country. The name later evolved into Piña, or pineapple in English, and that's how the pineapple came to be. According to folklore, it's named after a spoiled child who was cursed with 1,000 eyes. That's what I wrote here. Mm-hmm. Look before you ask. You look with your eyes, not your mouth. I wanted to tell these folk tales because I think, in culture in general, we share through our food, through how we treat one another, and how, there's a lot of unique things that differentiate us from other people. I think mm-hmm. One big significant indicator of our differences is the stories we tell each other. The definition of a folk tale is a form of expression employed by the people as a response to their daily rigors of existence.
That's my favorite one.
The piña.
Yeah, I got it the most.
I like the man with the coconuts and the carabao in the shell because I resonated with it a lot, and I think there's a lot of, even as I get older, I think there's a lot I can take from the story, you know, like it's being patient, you know, is something that I'm learning to apply more into my life, you know.